مساء الخير وأهلا بكم إلى حلقة جديدة من واشنطن أونلاين. ما هي آلية التنسيق المعتمدة بين تركيا والولايات المتحدة لتجنب التصعيد بين جيشا حلف الناتو، حيث تتواجد القوات الأمريكية في مناطق خاضعة لقوات سوريا الديمقراطية، وفي نفس الوقت تقوم تركيا وهي أيضا دولة أخرى عضو في حلف الناتو بقصف هذه المناطق التي يتواجد فيها الجيش الأمريكي؟ فهل تبلغ تركيا الجانب الأمريكي قبل إقدامها على قصف مناطق خاضعة لقوات سوريا الديمقراطية؟ وكيف يرد الجيش الأمريكي في مثل هذه الحالة؟ هذا ما نبحثه في حلقة اليوم من واشنطن أونلاين مع ضيفي المتحدث السابق باسم التحالف الدولي لمكافحة تنظيم داعش مايلز كاغنز. ابقوا معنا لمتابعة هذه الحلقة. أهلا بك مايلز مرة أخرى في واشنطن أونلاين. مايلز، هناك مؤخرا المزيد من التصعيد التركي ضد مناطق شمال شرق سوريا، هذه مناطق يتواجد فيها الجيش الأمريكي. هل تقوم تركيا عادة بإبلاغ الجانب الأمريكي قبل البدء بقصف بعض المناطق لكي تبتعد مثلا الفرق الأمريكية من هذه المناطق فلا يكون هناك ضحايا أمريكيين؟ لأننا نعرف طبعا أنه سيكون هناك تبعات سياسية باهظة الثمن على العلاقة الأمريكية التركية إذا قامت تركيا بقتل جنود أمريكيين على الأراضي السورية. ما الذي يحدث تحديدا لتجنب التصعيد بين البلدين؟
Well, marhaba and assalamu alaikum and Ramadan Mubarak. Hildil. Thank you for these important questions about the situation in North and East Syria. You have reported on the attacks in recent weeks by Turkey and Turkish-backed forces in areas along the border in North Syria. There are also attacks happening in Kurdistan region of Iraq, in northern Iraq. These attacks are part of Turkey's campaign where they claim they have security concerns. Let's look back a few years ago. We know that Turkey talked about these security concerns when they invaded Afrin in northwestern Syria. Turkey has talked about these security concerns when it worked with the United States to establish a security mechanism zone, a safe zone. And during that period, in October of 2019, there were joint patrols with US forces and Turkish forces, as well as joint flights overhead to look at defensive positions that were made by the Syrian Democratic Forces. Those defensive positions along the border were removed. But now Turkey continues these attacks, and unfortunately, there are civilians being harmed and killed. We've learned recently that there are special secret prisons in Northeast Syria, and all of these activities are a distraction against the continued fight against ISIS.
نعم، ولكن مايلز أخبرنا أكثر عن آلية هذه التنسيق لتجنب سقوط ضحايا من الجيش الأمريكي، لأنه مثل ما ذكرت سابقا نعرف سيكون هناك مشكلة سياسية كبرى إذا ما قتلت تركيا جنود أمريكيين، وهذا بالفعل لم يحدث، وبالتالي يبدو أن هناك تنسيق حتى لا يكون هناك ضحايا أمريكيين في هذا القصف التركي المستمر على شمال شرق سوريا. هل يعلم الجيش الأمريكي في المنطقة في شمال شرق سوريا بكل عملية تركية جديدة قبل أن تحدث؟
Since the beginnings of the fight against ISIS in 2015, and over the years, there's been a continued discussion between the military forces in the region for deconfliction. Prior to any airstrikes that are happening in Syria or Iraqi Kurdistan, where there are US or coalition troops, there's a discussion between the military of Russia or Turkey or the United States, also sometimes the government of Iraq, to ensure that there are no friendly partner forces that are struck by an ally. In 2019, October 2019, US troops departed Manbij and Kobani and moved to the eastern provinces of Hasaka and Deir ez-Zor. The Turkish attacks into Kobani and Ain Issa, where there are not U.S. troops, happen independently of coordination. I left the region in September 2020, and I think that these protocols, these processes still continue. And at no time do we want our allies, or do we, the United States, want to harm any friendly forces or other military forces in the region that can lead to fratricide, the killing of friendly forces, or an unintentional escalation of tensions between the forces in the region, including Russia and the Syrian regime.
نعم، هل يعني ما تتحدث عنه الآن عدم رغبة الولايات المتحدة بخوض حرب مع القوات التركية على الأراضي السورية، يعني أن الولايات المتحدة لن يكون أمامها خيار سوى السكوت على هذا التصعيد التركي في شمال شرق سوريا، وربما يتطور هذا التصعيد الآن إلى عمليات جديدة في مناطق سيطرة قسد؟
I'm not a participant in any current military or diplomatic discussions. I'm here in New York as speaking to you as an expert in my role as a fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. But I think my colleagues in Washington and my colleagues who are in Rojava, as well as in Turkey, are discussing probably these ongoing activities, this ongoing military aggression by Turkey, and trying to keep the peace as much as possible. Sometimes Turkey will act through its proxy forces. They have militias, groups that are in northeast Syria, and those groups will do these attacks on the ground. The U.S. partner is the Syrian Democratic Forces. I've been on your program, and the world knows that the SDF are strong forces and are responsible for defeating ISIS, as well as keeping ISIS from coming back. So any of these attacks that the SDF faces are a distraction from its mission and a distraction from the world's goals of stopping ISIS from ever making a comeback and harming people in the region.
كيف يؤثر هذا التصعيد برأيك سيد مايلز على الخلايا النائمة لتنظيم داعش اللي دائما يتحدث عنها التحالف الدولي، يقول أنها لم تنتهي بعد، أننا لازلنا في شمال شرق سوريا وكذلك في العراق لمكافحة هذه الخلايا، وبالفعل يعني من وقت إلى آخر نرى هجمات تشنها يعني أشخاص أو مجموعات محسوبة على داعش. كيف يؤثر هذا التصعيد التركي على هذه المهمة؟
The region is complex with many players in it, many different military forces from nation states and terrorist groups. We've seen in the Deir ez-Zor province that there have been attacks from Iranian-backed militias onto SDF and US bases and Green Village. And we've seen recent small attacks from ISIS along the Euphrates River Valley and assassinations of Asaish and SDF. This is another sign that ISIS is continuing to be a threat and that we need to focus all of the world's energy on defeating ISIS permanently. We know that ISIS wants to coordinate another big prison break. We know that ISIS hopes to spread its ideology around the world and retake land in the way that they had land in 2014. That's not going to happen because the US and the coalition remain committed to helping our partners in Hezbollah Syria Democratic and the Iraqi security forces in Peshmerga to continue to beat back ISIS. And we're providing advice and assistance and military equipment to help them be successful in that fight.
هل تعتقد أن المتغيرات السياسية ما يجري تحديدا في حرب أوكرانيا يقود إلى هذا التصعيد في شمال شرق سوريا؟ يعني الولايات المتحدة اليوم ملف أوكرانيا يأخذ صدارة الاهتمام بالنسبة لها، كذلك الدول الأوروبية التي تجري هذه الحرب بالقرب منها. هل يقلل كل هذا من اهتمام التحالف الدولي بمكافحة تنظيم داعش وإرساء الاستقرار في شمال شرق سوريا؟
One of the great things about the US military is its ability to project power, and our leaders are able to coordinate military activity around the world. Certainly, Ukraine has the world's attention, and for good reason. Russia has invaded Ukraine. There's ongoing fighting and humanitarian crisis with millions of people who have fled Ukraine into Eastern Europe. The U.S. has committed now more than $3 billion in military equipment, including drones and cannons and ammunition and personal defensive equipment to the Ukrainian military just this year. This is a continuing partnership that we've had with Ukraine over many years. We are still able to maintain focus in Iraq and Syria on the anti-ISIS fight. Just 2 weeks ago, the four-star commanding general of U.S. forces in the Middle East visited General Mazloum at his headquarters in Syria. This is a sign, a clear sign, that we want to send a message that the United States remains committed to the fight against ISIS, and we remain strong partners with the Syrian Democratic Forces.
هل ممكن أن نرى تصعيد أمريكي روسي أو تغير في النظرة الأمريكية للوجود الروسي في سوريا من جراء هذا التوتر الروسي الأمريكي في حرب أوكرانيا؟
The U.S. mission in Iraq and Syria has been very clear since 2014, and that's the permanent defeat of ISIS. And the United States does not seek to get into military confrontations with Russia and the regime in Syria. Of course, the United States troops have the ability for self-defense, and right now it seems to be the status quo. Things are today as they were yesterday, as they were a month or a year ago in terms of the U.S. And Russian competition in Syria. I think we'll see it continue along this trend, but of course, there will be a watchful eye on all Russian activities in Europe, in the Middle East, and around the world.
نعم سيد مايلز، أي نوع من المساعدات تحتاج اليوم قوات سوريا الديمقراطية لإرساء استقرار أكبر في المنطقة لمنع كل هذه التحديات مثل القصف التركي، التصعيد التركي من تعطيل مهمة مكافحة داعش؟
Yeah, I talked to my friend Sinam Muhammad. Sinam is the Syrian Democratic Council representative in Washington, D.C. I saw her just a few weeks ago at a Nowruz celebration, and we talked briefly about the goals of the autonomous administration. And the autonomous administration's focus continues to be maintaining a partnership with the United States and in the region on the ground in Iraq and Syria. The councils, the community councils that are led by the autonomous administration have made recent modifications to their relationships and their rules in the region to try to get all people together. You know, it's not just Kurds. You're aware of this, that the autonomous administration includes Arabs, Syrians, Armenians, and a number of other cultural groups and multi-religion and multi-ethnic and multi-language. So the autonomous administration wants to maintain this and wants to participate desperately in the discussions of a peace settlement in Syria with the United Nations.
نعم، حضرتك ذكرت في هذا اللقاء أنه حين تتحدث تركيا عن مخاوف أمنية وتقوم بالتصعيد والقصف في المناطق في شمال سوريا تكون مقبلة على عملية عسكرية جديدة، وضربت مثال ما حدث في عفرين. هل نتوقع أن تكون تركيا اليوم تفكر في عملية جديدة واسعة النطاق في شمال شرق سوريا؟ هل ستسمح الولايات المتحدة بذلك؟ وهل اهتمام واشنطن اليوم بتماسك حلف الناتو ممكن أن يتركها تسكت على عملية تركية جديدة ضد الإدارة الذاتية؟
The United States remains strongly committed to NATO, and we know Russia wants NATO to fall apart. Terrorist groups love any sort of confusion, so ISIS really likes to get involved when they see Turkey causing tensions throughout North and East Syria. ISIS likes to start to take activity when Iranian militias are attacking SDF and United States bases in Syria. So we have to watch out for everything. But again, the public statements and the policy of the United States is to remain committed to the region, to help the people of the region to come back and recover from the Syrian civil war, Assad and Russia's war on the people of Syria. That's a terrible war, and also to provide military assistance to the Syrian Democratic Forces, including training for the very proud and brave warriors of the Hezin anti-terror and Yekinayan anti-terror troops, and stipends, monetary payments to the guards, the Asaish and the guards inside the detention camps.
ما هو برأيك الحل الأمثل، السيناريو الأفضل الممكن قابل للتحقق لحل مشكلة المخيمات التي تضم عائلات داعش وكذلك مراكز الاحتجاز، السجون التي تضم معتقلين لداعش؟
Yeah, this is going to be a long-term problem. It's a big problem. We have a few different problems. One is that these camps provide a place for the ISIS families and ISIS detainees to do a couple of things. One, they can rest, and we saw that they had rested in the big breakout. They can recruit, particularly in the camps that have family members. So they're resting, they're recruiting, they're radicalizing, becoming more and more extreme with this ICI ideology. And then they can research, ultimately, is what they want to do. So they must be stopped. The solutions will require international community to bring back their citizens. It requires that these detainees are interviewed and they are rehabilitated, and if possible, prosecuted and put in prison under proper prison sentences. This will require the Syrian regime to have working courts. The Iraqi government needs to have appropriate facilities to bring back the thousands of Iraqis who are locked up in North and East Syria, but it'll take a long, long, long time, and we cannot forget about this important role that the Syrian Democratic Forces are doing on behalf of the free world, keeping everybody detained.
شكرا لك مايلز.
Maslama and Zor Spas.
شكرا لكل متابعي نورث بريس وواشنطن أونلاين. ألقاكم في حلقة جديدة الأسبوع المقبل. إلى اللقاء.